Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Good morning.
Okay. Morning. So looking at the schedule, we're supposed to start from Unit 6. I don't know if Ms. Bullitt did any of Unit. Did she do Unit 6? Did she cover it? Hello? Okay, no answer.
Hi, good morning. Yes, ma'am, we covered Unit 6.
You did cover Unit 6. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
so in Unit 6, let's look at the questions that's actually in the unit. Let me tell you which page it's on. And I had it marked, you know. On page 215 at the bottom. First question asks us, does an honest and ethical business possess more effective frontline defenses? What's your answer? You see the bullet points at the bottom of page 215? Simone, Annie, Ivania.
I just joined. I'm not too. What are you guys talking about?
Page 215, there are some questions at the bottom because you've already done Unit 6. I want to go through the questions. The first question is, does an honest and ethical business process possess more effective frontline defense?
I would say no. Good morning. I would say no. Don't ask me why, but I would say no. Just because something is honest and ethical, it doesn't mean that anything has been put in place.
Okay, explain that more.
Oh. I mean, honest and ethical business, somebody who's a food store or, you could open a business. It could be an honest and ethical meaning, you might have, internal ethics, things that go on within your company, your beliefs. But frontline defenses are to ward off certain things. So one really, I don't know if I should go as far as to say one doesn't have anything to do with the next.
You sure? Okay, so what does it mean to have a frontline defense?
How to answer it? Well, not about the frontline defense, right? I think the frontline defense, your first frontline is going to be your employees or your staff, right? But I would say that honest and ethical business would have a more effective frontline defense simply because you would go through more rigorous staff training. You would kind of embed the ethics and morality of how you have to carry out your job, and also allow staff to know that there are people watching them. Like, it's not just we're telling you to do this. No, like we're practicing this and we're putting these things into fruition like daily in our daily tasks. Doing that, I would say that it would have a stronger front line of defense. Like your staff would be more aware of the risks that they're facing, and they would be more like stringent in how they handle them, and also in how they carry themselves. They'd be less likely to take bribes and to be swayed to do things that are unethical.
Okay, that's a good answer. Anybody else wants to add to that? Saran?
Hi. Yes, I think an honest and ethical business possesses a more effective frontline defense because if you're honest and ethical, that means that you're trying to abide by the rules and the regulations that is established for your company in the particular industry that you work in. So everyone is aware of the consequences, or more aware, I should say, of the consequences of acting in an unethical manner. So if they are trained and they know the importance of doing everything the right way and the consequences that could come to the company, for the company itself and for themselves in terms of their receiving any type of punishment, be it being fired or being monetary punishment, that they're more likely to be more rigorous and helping the company screen out bad actors that can do innumerable damage to the company as a whole.
Okay. So it's a good answer. Everybody agree so far? They understand the correlation between having a front line that is honest and ethical and how it makes to having the business itself being more effective, and because it impacts the bottom line. Everybody's on the same page now. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
So the next, honest and ethical business more likely to recruit and retain staff who are also honest and ethical.
I would say yes, mainly
Uh-huh.
because, well, first of all, you have to have an environment. Like, in my opinion, misconduct needs opportunity and it needs an environment to thrive, right? And those are two things that if your firm is operating ethically, it's not going to happen because you don't have, and you may have the opportunity, but you won't have the environment in which it's going to thrive. So that's the first thing. People tend to do what they could get away with. And if you know you're in an environment that you can't get away with certain things, you're not going to attempt it a lot of times. Also, you kind of know what to look for when you're interviewing persons, when you're looking to recruit staff. Yeah.
Okay. Now remember, this is GRC. So if you are answering this, just like how you're answering me, and if I was an examiner, you have to remember to put all the elements of GRC into your answer. So you gave a good answer, but you're missing something in your response. Any help?
Okay, I'll chime in here. I would say to support Jafe's answer, you are more likely for an honest and ethical business to recruit and retain staff who are also honest and ethical, because that is a part of your organization's value system. That's how you operate. So you are, in addition to you being more likely, because you like. So when you are interviewing and recruiting staff, you are going to be using dynamics and matrices to elicit, try to elicit and understand the person's character, because when you're honest and ethical in a business, you tend to, when you scrutinize clients, you tend to be more aware of, okay, is this person ethical? Is this person acting in an ethical manner? So you are more likely to use your value system. You're more likely to see if someone is trying to hoodwink you, as it were. And so therefore, I think that you, knowing the values of your system, knowing the personal values that you want to see in employees, you are more likely to evaluate those persons alongside of your company's value systems, your drive for ethics and integrity, your statement. And so you are more likely to weed out those who do not possess those qualities, because those are the qualities that you're looking for.
Okay. And so you've alluded to it, Saran. So when you're talking about recruiting and retaining staff based on your honest and ethical business, it means that yes, you will use matrices, but all of those will be based upon your policies and your procedures that you have developed, right? You've developed those policies and procedures, and these elements are ingrained in that. So the questions that you ask, the qualities that you're looking for, and also based on your interview using the human skills, these are the things that you're looking for, because they will trigger whether or not you meet the culture of the organization.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So remember, whenever you talk, right. So whenever you talk about GRC, always remember you have to talk about, there's some key words you have to remember, and they relate to each one of the letters, the G, the R, and the C. You can't get out of answering any GRC question without talking about policies and procedures. You can't get out of it without talking about risk assessment, risk appetite. And governance means that you have to know all of the key elements when you advise a board. They come together. They all tie together whenever you write an answer. That's what the examiner is looking for.
So ask a question, Ms. Archer. So question is more pointing towards, for example, risk assessment, risk management process. You still have to bring in elements of governance and compliance, even though the question is tailor-made and geared towards just maybe risk assessment, risk management.
Yeah, when you summing up at the end, you would add that what's the contribution of governance to this?
Okay.
Because whatever you do at the end, governance plays a part in it.
Right. I see. It's easiest to bring in risk and compliance since it's so fused together, so similar together. But the governance part, I guess I understand where you're coming from. Yeah,
governance means that you're reporting to the board. Governance means that the board is doing what it's supposed to do. And the same thing for senior management. So it's whether or not senior management is playing the role that it should play, whether senior management is reporting to the board what they should be reporting, are they doing it on a timely fashion? And then whether or not the board itself has set the tone from the top to senior management to give to staff in order for things to run properly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
That's how you show the examiner that you've taken all of the elements and put it together. So at the very end, if you want to just write one sentence or two sentences by say, in order for all of these strategies or all of the tools or all of the plans stated above to be effective in an organization, of course, the governance perspective of this has to play a major role and saying that the board and senior management can, then the examiner knows you understand.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So the next question says, does having ethics, values, and principles clearly stated mean that there is less likelihood of internal engagement in criminal activity such as fraud? What do you think? Do you think that will deter someone? By having these ethical values and principles? Will that deter?
Objectively, yes, especially if it's accompanied with like the consequences of breaches. Like I think that and it's being reinforced constantly, not just having it like written somewhere, but it's like you ensure that people actually read it and understand it and know what it entails. I think that it can be a deterrent in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm. So why do we see fraud still happening?
Well,
Always
I
in
think
the
that
paper.
objectively, right? Because people are still going to do what they want to do, especially if you have the opportunity to do it. There's still going to be someone that's going to take that chance. And I mean, well, questionably, is it something that is like repeatedly articulated that everybody is like always aware of and they are aware that people are watching them? Or is it a situation where they see things getting lax and so they say, well, hey, I could probably take this chance, and they take it?
I've done some research for other papers that state that fraud is committed by, well, outside of the large frauds, the big corporation frauds, which are the senior people that actually put all of the ethics and all that in place. I've read that fraud occurs or is conducted by employees of long tenure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Remember now, fraud, in order to commit fraud, one, you have to know the policies. One, you have to know the procedures. Once you know those two, along with the IT system, then you can commit a fraud. So it says, does having ethics, values, and principles clearly stated mean that there is less likelihood of internal engagement in criminal activity? Does it? Does it deter that?
It still happens. It still happens.
Yeah.
It still happens. And like I said, the large corporate frauds, they are conducted by persons who put the rules in place.
Of course, because they know where the gaps are.
Right.
So is an authentically honest and ethical firm less likely to be attractive to criminals? What do you think?
For that one, I personally would say no, because I would think a criminal will probably think that they'll tend to think, well, this person is very naive. They're operating in a highly ethical and honest practice, and they expect everyone else to operate in that practice. And so the criminal will say, okay, this person is very naive. I could come in there and bamboozle them, because they don't consider an honest and ethical company a company that, I don't know, for lack of a better word, that is aware, that knows what's going on, that they could come in there and try their endeavor best to just pull the wool over their eyes, because they look at them as easy pickings. So from that perspective, I think a criminal would be more likely to be attractive to an honest.
Yeah, I agree with you, because plus it poses a challenge.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what makes it attractive. Because if I'm able to go in and to them, they will get more recognition. Because you psyche of a criminal. Because it's all about getting attention, being the first to do something or doing it better than someone else, or not being caught. Until they get bored, and then they make mistakes in order to be caught. So did you all read the article, this example of the UPS rogue trader? No? Okay, so what I want to do this morning now is I want us to read the scenario for the assignment, the upcoming assignment. Who started it? Because you have roughly what, 5 weeks? 4 weeks? 5 weeks. Who has started it? Simone, Maria, have you started it?
No, ma'am, I haven't. No.
Oh, I had a shock. You're supposed to be excited.
I have another paper I trying to write.
You're supposed to be excited, ready to go.
I thought for this to be over with.
Listen, yeah, don't be too eager for it to be over with, because once you get in the field, the challenge really begins. There's things to be thrown at you from all angles. All right. So who wants to start first and pick apart the second paragraph? So it says, you are the newly appointed senior risk officer at BD, a firm operating and regulated in the sector and jurisdiction of your choice. During your first week in your new post, there are reports in the media of a regulatory sanction concerning AI, one of BD's direct competitors, which offers similar products and services. Like, stop right there. What is that telling you?
Well, I would say that there's something going on in the industry. It's a firm that sells similar products to you. So if it's a commercial bank, this is also a commercial bank selling the same products that you do, and they have done something to alarm the regulators. So my first thought would be, what have they done, and are we doing it as well?
Okay, go deeper. What else?
My first thought would be that if it offers similar products and services and it faces regulatory sanctions, that means it's a possibility that my organization could also run afoul of those same regulatory sanctions, potentially.
Yes, okay. What else?
Also, I guess we have to do a new risk assessment of the things that of our products and services. Try to see like where
Going too
I gone too
far.
far. Okay, let me pull it back then.
Yeah. With that first, everything that you said so far about that first sentence in the second paragraph is correct. I want you to think, this is an examination question. So imagine if you were sitting in an exam, right? You have this question and it's telling you that you have a product your products and services are similar to a competitor who has a regulatory sanction. So the two things that jump out to you in that. One, you need to identify a product. Because when you answer your questions on the next page, you have to be talking about a particular product. And secondly, it has to be a product that can, where the regulator can issue a regulatory sanction. Because you can't be talking out of the air. So before you even go further into this question in your mind, you must have the product or the service, and you must know what the regulatory sanctions may be posed by the regulator. Because that's what you're going to write about. So now, like you said, if it's a bank, you have similar products and services, you have to choose one. And then you have to determine what would be a regulatory sanction. What is it that the company has not done whereby the regulator would impose a sanction? And what would that sanction be? So it says the reported sanction relates to weaknesses in the systems and controls relating to a particular product. Details of this scandal have come to light through a whistleblower who has expressed concerns that these matters were not being taken seriously by senior management. So what is that telling you there?
I think it speaks to a lack systems of controls. They lack controls.
Mm-hmm.
It's not being taken seriously by senior management. That's an issue of controls. That's a risk issue. That's a compliance issue. That's a major issue.
And governance.
And governance, all of it. Yeah, that's a breakdown. That's a breakdown in GRC.
Yes. So the executive board of BD have asked for reassurance that sufficient measures are in place to ensure that there's no possibility that BD will be the subject of similar negative publicity. So now they're getting scared. As you are not yet fully familiar with the current situation of BD, you invite several of your more experienced risk colleagues to a meeting to discuss the scandal and the issue of reputational risk more generally. So in advance of that meeting, you decided to familiarize yourself with the output of recent compliance monitoring and other relevant MI produced internally for BD. Following your review of this, you are concerned about what you find. Your initial reading of the current situation at BD can be summed up as follows. MI is not being submitted in a timely manner. What is that telling you?
Well, the text says that MI is basically done by the business function. So those probably like if it's a bank on the first line of defense, those are maybe in a private banking arena. They are perhaps not, they have the information, but they're not giving it to those in the risk department who depend on it to do their risk assessment, to do the risk management process. So there's in my view, there seems to be some lack of maybe communication. Maybe the front line doesn't know how important the information that they have is, and how it's important to aid in the risk assessment. There's some sort of disconnect I would get from that situation.
Okay, so it says here, okay, I hear you mention risk assessment, right? But it says MI is not being submitted in a timely manner. So that means that the business owners are
Mhm.
not their information to the relevant senior management to include in their reports to the board. It's a process. And there's a breakdown in that process.
Mm.
Information is not being submitted in a timely manner. So that means if there's a board meeting that is due tomorrow, you cannot present your information today. Because matters going to the board has a cutoff time in order for the board to be able to read it. And then if you send the information from this month at the next board meeting, it is too late. So that's what the first bullet point is telling you. There's a breakdown in that process. Someone is not doing their job and senior management is not following up. Then it says, MI in relation to key issues is not being effectively collated. So what's that issue? Key issues not being collated.
Well, I'll take a stab at it. When you collate something, that means you're bringing it together.
Correct?
So that means all of the information that you would need maybe to understand the issue, maybe to even come up with a response to the issue, you're not getting it because it's in disparate parts. It's on one person piece of information in this silo, the next person has a piece of information in this silo, and they're not being brought together and being brought to the persons who needed information to respond to the issue.
Right. So key issues falls under which one? Is it risk or is it compliance? Or is it both?
Can it be both of them? The key issues of risk and compliance?
Yes, because compliance will look at the issues and risk will look at the risks that would impact the organization based upon the
Right.
issues. Okay. So the next one is limited activity appears to be being undertaken to identify and assess risk in the firm. So what does that mean? What is going on there? Limited activity appears to be being undertaken to identify and assess risk in the firm. Who's responsible for identifying risk?
Shouldn't that be the members of the same risk department? Actually, risks, anyone could identify risk. So, because risk, just as compliance is everybody's responsibility, risk, I think, is every employee's responsibility. If they see something that's not being done properly, that could have a material impact on an organization. So,
Okay.
but in this context, maybe they're speaking to the fact that there are breakdown in the risk department. But more generally speaking, everyone is responsible for identifying and assessing risk, in my view.
Okay, so they say limited activity appears to be being undertaken to identify and assess risk in the firm. So we know today in every organization, they have to conduct a risk assessment. And in that risk assessment, each business owner does his own risk assessment. Compliance risk assessment is separate from the business owner's risk assessment. And so what they're telling you is that there isn't a framework in place for the assessment of risk, going through all of the steps, identifying, assessing, evaluating, mitigating. They don't see this being done. And so when you say there is a framework in place, it means that it's not methodical. It's haphazard. Again, that falls on risk and compliance. Then it says risks are dealt with only on a reactive basis. Again, that's telling you they don't have a framework and a process in place. Because it's only when something happens like the scandal that they decide that they need to see what is wrong. So it says risk assessment activity is ad hoc. Senior managers are not kept informed, and/or risk assessments do not influence the design and implementation of relevant policies and procedures in the firm. So what is that telling you? Maria? Simone? Annie? Dimitri, okay.
Morning.
What is that telling you?
Well, it says that to me, that the firm has not set up any. I mean, I don't know what to say. They seem to be, totally out of it, and they're very susceptible to being sanctioned, obviously, in various levels. That's what it's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot, but you're gonna have to answer the questions succinctly and coherently. So you need to wrap your mind around now what exactly is going on and respond in GRC language. Because they've given you a lot of bullet points. But as you can see from the ones that we have discussed already, they're all roads leading to the same place.
Yeah,
So
well,
when they say risk assessment activity is ad hoc, again, it points to having a process in place. And whenever it is done, that senior management is not involved in it. That's another process. And then they say the risk assessments don't influence the design of relevant policies. So again, that is another process, because once you've done a risk assessment and you've identified your risk and you've stated whether it's high, medium, or low, and then you've done your mitigation plan, then you need to put policies and procedures in place. So that whole process is not in place. And of course, once you've drafted the policies and procedures in cooperation with the owners of those policies and risk reviews it, then it has to go to the board. So the next one says, limited quality assurance activity is carried out to review the effectiveness of existing systems and controls. So what is that telling you?
That is saying that no one is performing a proper audit of those policies and procedures and control to see if they are working the way that they should be working.
Okay, so depends on the product. Then you will discuss whether it's compliance and audit reviews, or just compliance reviews, or just audit reviews. And if you want to, sometimes you could always request a special audit just for quality assurance. Knowing that you have a product that is similar to the one that's being sanctioned, one of your recommendations can be to have a special audit come in and do a quality assurance. Then it says there is limited senior management involvement in and challenge to compliance activities. What's that telling you?
Well, obviously, the ineffectiveness of the policies and protocols, or the absence of them altogether, is not even being reviewed by senior management. They're basically ineffective. I don't, you know, it's, I can continue to say it's a lot, but that's just a phrase I use.
Okay,
So,
all right.
Does it
So-
mean that the senior management probably don't have the competence to challenge compliance activities? Are they fit for purpose?
Mm. I'm trying to figure if you should mention that, because this is more in line of it says the senior management doesn't challenge compliance activities.
Right. So I'm trying to figure out, do they know they should challenge us, or sometimes they may feel, hey, compliance present one thing one way, and if they don't have enough of knowledge, they're like, okay, well, if compliance says so, then it should be so, because they don't have the knowledge to challenge what compliance may have incorporated in their reports.
Or maybe they're of the view that that is compliance job. Why do I have
And they should take a hand. And
Yeah.
they should take a hands-off approach. Why do I have to get involved? Possibly.
I prefer that than mentioning competency.
Okay.
But again, a structure should be in place. So even though compliance reports directly to the board, there should be a process in place where compliance can sit down and discuss general concerns from an operational point of view of issues that they see and where there are gaps in the policies and procedures. So it says in the last paragraph, you can also see that there have been concerns about such issues for some time. But there is very little indication of what action has been taken to address them so far, or who, if anyone, has attempted to take charge of the problem. So that means that when you answer, you need to say who is going to be in charge of fixing all of this. Who is the responsible person or persons? So when we look at the questions, they've divided them up. Part 1 has 30, part 2 has 70. Did anyone do the word counters yet? For each question?
So part 1, it depends on whether you're doing 3,000 words or 3,500. So the word count for that will be 900 to 1,050, depending on each one of those bullet points. If you're averaging 300 to 350 words. Part 2, the 10-mark questions, again, about 300 to 350 words on the 10 marks, and the 40 marks, about 1,200 to 1,400 words based on a 3,000 or 3,500 word count.
Okay. Everybody agree? They're so silent. Okay, So
I guess
part
that's
Okay, so part one says, with reference to the information provided in the above scenario, explain what immediate action you would now take and why. What's the first thing you're going to do? And it's not right to the board.
Conduct a risk assessment.
You can.
Identify the products or the services that are being sanctioned at the other company, and then conduct a risk assessment.
Uh-huh. But let me ask you a question though. Based upon the issues that she found, are these issues related to just one product?
Sounds like the entire portfolio, whatever business they're conducting there, it's a company issue. That's a bank issue. Everything is wrong in there. Everybody went to lunch.
All right. So you have to tailor your answer around one, the scandal product, and two, the whole organization. So immediate action, you say, is a risk assessment. A risk assessment would include the product and whatever else. What else can you do as an immediate action? Go back to the bullet points. What do you think is the most, what is the biggest problem that they're having? Is it a risk assessment?
Information being disseminated in a timely manner.
Mm-hmm.
and they have a collation problem.
Okay.
I think the problem could be summed up as an operational problem, because all of these things would have been covered if they had their operational procedures down pat to say, okay, this is what should happen and this is the time that it should be happening in. And if that doesn't happen, then by this point, something else should have happened. All of this not reporting on time, all of this keeping the board unawares of matters, all of this waiting until somebody else was sanctioned to actually try to figure out if they were at risk, all of that is operational.
Okay. So what is your immediate action? If you say it's operational.
I was gonna find another job first.
Can run from challenges.
This a
Trust-
mess. This is different from a challenge.
Hold on now. When you enter into this field of AML, stroke, CTF, stroke, what it is, WMD, WMD and GRC, you will see that your jobs come with the word mess.
When you negotiate salary, you negotiate based on you thinking a company is functioning properly.
Of course.
You
But when
expect challenges to come along the way, but you don't expect to meet this.
you will meet many of this in your experience. So that's why I'm telling you, you have to be prepared.
Ms. Archer, would it be overkill to recommend a temporary suspension of similar products pending a review of internal policies and procedures? Would that be an overkill?
Yeah, that's how you're gonna get paid.
Well, I mean, I said temporarily, pending a review, and an RA, you know.
You got all of this.
Pardon me?
All of that has to be done while business is going on.
Okay. Okay.
This product is probably popular because it makes, well, we assume we're identifying a product, but their products, a lot of this might be due to, you know, remuneration that comes with certain products they have. They know they have money making.
It's probably a money-making product.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the issue at hand. What's your immediate? I already got.
I think which, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying with all of these issues are going on, I mean, the first thing come to my mind is, listen, I got to get all the stakeholders together in a room, and we need to say, okay, this is what we've found. And, you know, you need to make everybody aware. It doesn't sound like everybody's aware of how unorganized and unstructured and no framework that's existing in this whole company's GRC, and you need to bring them together and say, listen, these are the things. You've got to get people to understand, hey, there is a problem.
Okay.
So I think that's the first thing you need to do. You need to get people together and say, okay, this is the problem.
Okay, so you've answered the second bullet point and the first bullet point in one.
Okay.
Okay, because the second bullet point asks you who you're going to liaise with and why.
Right.
The first bullet point is where you gave the other answer, which is the framework. What's immediate action? You have to put a framework in place. You need to look at the existing framework, see where there are deficiencies, but you need a framework. You can't operate without a framework.
They don't seem to have anything to follow.
Right, that's what a framework is all about.
Yeah, they don't have anything to follow. Nobody is, I don't think it's that persons are not following. I mean, they're not following because there's nothing to follow.
Exactly. So that means that you have to put frameworks in place.
Ms. Archer, yeah, I understand that we have to put a framework in place, but look, seeing how the situation is dire. I mean, do you have a lengthy period of time to put in my question is, how involved this framework have to be? This framework needs to be something that needs to be planned over, you know, a period of time. But for right now, you need to put a stopgap measure in place. So when you say we have to put a framework, is it a complete framework or just a framework to say, okay, let's get on the board because this is immediate? If you get what I'm saying, you need a framework, but do you have the time to delve deep to put in the optimal framework you need, or do you need to come up with some, you know, quick little patch to stop the hemorrhaging so that you can get to that framework that the company so desperately needs?
No, patch don't work.
Right. But do you have time to develop a full framework, you know, at this moment where a company is already being sanctioned and you don't know whether the regulator is coming or knocking on everybody's door who has the same services to say, okay, we need to come and examine how you're doing this, how this product is working and services. Do you have the time to come up with an elaborate, all-encompassing framework to head off?
And don't they have to be approved? Frameworks have to be approved, right? I just can't sit down and write a framework and then.
Yeah. So you put you draft a framework, right? A framework to cover all areas of the organization. Then you write a plan. Because see, the third bullet point says the basis on which you prioritize your next steps. So then you decide which area you're going to focus on. So you have an overall framework. And then you have to decide where you're going to focus on. Where are the deficiencies that you have already identified? Where do you need to work right now? See, the regulator understands if you have a framework in place and you're working on it. And you have a plan as to how you're going to work on it with a time frame.
Wouldn't Ms. Archer, wouldn't we look at the last regulatory visit to see what the findings were at that time? And maybe, you know, start from that point. Also have a look at the last internal audit review.
But don't forget now, her summary with the bullet points supposed to be everything that she's found.
But she's gotten there obviously since the last regulatory visit, and they're still open between her being hired and the last regulatory visit. So maybe some things fell apart, over the last maybe 6 months or so. I mean, couldn't you start from the last regulatory visit and up to this point where she's discovered? I mean, we realize there's an issue, but maybe the issue is not as bad as it's being presented here because they're still in business.
But it doesn't mention.
Sorry, go ahead.
Scenario doesn't mention that.
But don't we assume, I mean.
No, don't, no.
It's like a
No.
bank in the Bahamas, like how this been open for so long and been doing foolishness for a long time. And we assume that it's like a one of them.
Yeah, don't, just go with the facts that are in the scenario. Now, when you take the product, right, you can bring in your work experience. So it depends on how you write it. But I don't want you to make assumptions to add to the scenario. You will have to make your assumption based on your product and your work experience. Like when you give an example. But don't add the assumption to the scenario. So it depends on how you write it. Now, everybody's gonna have a different response as to what their immediate action will be. But remember that your immediate action has to cover how you're going to address all of these issues that they have found. And don't forget now, she's putting this together before she has the meeting with her other risk colleagues. So you have to think about what's that first action you're going to take and why. And notice that the examiner, he wants the rationale for your approach for each one of those. So when you're answering part, you're going to answer language.
I'm sorry, Ms. Archer, you were breaking up just now. Can you repeat that?
Okay. I said in part one, you're going to be answering in risk language. Because you are the senior risk person. And they're asking you to answer these 3 bullet points. So you're going to answer it from a risk perspective.
I think from a risk perspective, we would have to say that we are probably at high risk for being vulnerable to a sanction simply because we don't have that information because of the late reporting and the lack of the procedures and follow through. At this point, we basically don't know where we are. So that means that we basically need to assume that we're at high risk. So.
Sorry, your name is Archer.
Good day.
Sorry to disturb you, but I got a message from the office asking you to give them a call ASAP, please.
Oh, okay.
Okay, sorry for that.
Okay. Hold on for a moment, class. Let me make this call. think they have an exam going on. Hold on one sec. I'm back. Hello, I'm back.
Okay.
Okay, all right. So we know that one of the things that we will do, even if you want to say, I will start by drafting a framework or reviewing the existing framework in place by the prospective owners. Then, of course, like we said, the very first thing we will do a risk assessment. So you should have the product in line that you're going to use. And the first thing for that risk assessment is, I think you should show the examiner that you know how to conduct a risk assessment. So everybody's agreed they can handle part one now, right? And the next, and the second thing, like Zoran was saying, you have to decide who you're going to liaise with, and then you need to say why. And when you talk about why, you're going to explain their roles. And then they want you to discuss to prioritize your next steps. And of course, your prioritization will depend upon the risk level.
Archer, management includes VPs, or I mean executives are separate from management, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just asking the question.
When they say executive board?
No, we know the board is different. We know that definitely the board is different. But for example, in a bank, you have vice presidents of certain areas, you have AVPs of certain areas. Those are separate and apart from the board. So I'm just saying in this case, management, what this is like, for example, a branch manager, or is management in this case considered, say, branch managers, say VPs of sales or AVPs of certain areas. I mean, how do we put together the different
VPs, the VPs. Because risk would be reporting would be advising and reporting to the senior management. So that's the VPs or the AVPs. So now let's look at part two. So part two asks you to prepare a short report to the executive board. And in that report, you should provide an overview of the current position identified in the scenario and your response to part one. So now you're going to be writing this in governance language. So you're going to take what you did in part one, and you're going to make it into 300 words, summarizing it for the board.
Hello, Miss Archer. Sorry, my electricity went off. So my internet, I missed all of that, probably the last few minutes since I asked you the question. My electricity went off, so I'm on my phone now. Sorry about that.
That's what I'm on. Okay, no, so
Shh, Lulu.
Once you finish part one, we move into part two. In part two, we now in language. Because you're writing to the board. So part A, It's a summary of what you did for part one. It provided an overview of the current position identified in the scenario and your response to part one. Because remember, all the detail that you would have done in part one, you don't provide all of that detail to the board.
Okay.
So B say identifies what you believe to be the key issues of concern for the company. So what do you think those key issues are?
Reputational risk and risk of financial sanctions.
Any other risks?
Seem to be pretty much vulnerable to all. It's legal. There's a lot. It just I would just go down the list and just break down all of the risks that obviously susceptible to, and just briefly summarize it.
I think there's a lot of risk because she's still in her investigative stage. She's probably gonna cover quite a bit.
Yes. Especially when she does her risk assessment of the product.
Right.
Okay, I see at the bottom, they want you to give examples. So make sure you include examples when you give your answers to the board. Because the purpose of giving
Our made up examples, right? Our scenarios, we make up certain scenarios.
what do you mean make up scenario?
No, you said you should include appropriate examples in your report to support the points made. So we're gonna discuss what's happening with the particular products and then say that's what they mean by examples.
No, when you talk about reputation risks, you have to explain to the board what that means.
Oh, that's what just okay.
That's what they're looking for.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Right. So clearly, C says clearly explain the likely consequences for BD if these concerns are not addressed. So what you think you should be discussing there?
The fallout of the whole thing. The
Similar to what
consequences.
happened with the company scandal now.
Yeah, with AI, I think you should speak about the fact that we could face similar regulatory punishment as a result of our product not having proper GRC, just like it happened with Advanced International.
So
And
the likely this could be what? Regulatory
So they run
sanction.
they run the sanctions, fines, the fines / penalties could be due. Then of course, you, as we discussed in reputational risks, you could have a loss of clientele if they think you're just as bad as AI and they had an issue. So you could have a loss of clientele. Maybe staff may want to jump off the ship because you have the same issues with AI and they don't want to be associated with that. So it's a gamut of many consequences that could accrue from the situation.
Okay. So if I go back to B, when they say identify what you believe to be the key areas of concern, would you still list the risk? Or would you list the business owners?
Well, we're talking about from that perspective, the key areas of concern that you would have uncovered from your assessment, right? For this, I guess for one, the particular product, and two, the overall GRC and GRC environment in the organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the key areas of concern, I mean, for me, I would start out in with the product and service in particular. Say, okay, these are the key areas of concern for that product in particular that we could face. Or this is what concern me. And then overall, this is my concern for the whole GRC, the lack of a proper framework that we need to institute ASAP. So it would be those two areas I would focus on as my areas of concern.
Mm. Yeah,
A
because
question.
go ahead.
I have a question, Mr. Archer. Would it be okay to list the key areas and then in part C break down through showing examples of consequence why these key areas of concerns are sorry for being but just are areas of concern, and if they're not addressed, using examples, industry examples where firms were sanctioned, blah blah blah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You could do it like that.
Okay.
Yeah. And then they ask you to set out your short-term, medium-term, and long-term strategies for mitigating the key identified risks. And that's 40 points.
That's huge.
So you're taking the risk you've already identified, and you must have a short-term, medium-term, and long-term strategy.
Okay. Okay.
I think that's probably the hardest part of the question. Because you're gonna have to list the risk and then the strategy. And the strategies have to make sense. Everybody's a little bit clearer now, right? They could start. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so next class we'll do Unit 7, which is on regulatory risk management. And so by then you should have already decided what your product is. So you can apply it. And then when we go through 7, you should then have in your mind, once you would have conducted your risk assessment and on just the product itself and the risk assessment of all of these issues, you should have an idea as to where or how you would approach this question in terms of answering part 1. Because once you have the product, if you run it through your little make-through risk assessment, you should have an idea of what you need to write, what you need to cover. Everyone is clear now, right? Or a little bit clearer?
Yes.
Okay. So can I have some drafts before next week?
Sure, why not?
Say sure, why not? Okay, so should we focus on part one?
Okay.
Yeah, focus on part one and let's see what we have for next week. And then we'll do chapter 7 and let's see how your drafts match up. All right?
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so thank you all too.
All right, have
I'll
a
see
good
you
one.
all next week, right? And then I'll look at the drafts that you send in
All right, thank you.
and
Awesome,
provide
thank you.
comments. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Nice weekend, everybody.
Have a good weekend.
You too.
You too.
Okay. Get working.